Welcome to this edition of Real World Employment Law, where we discuss real-world issues impacting businesses and executives. I'm Declan Leonard. I'm managing partner here at Berenzweig Leonard, and I also head up the firm's employment law practice.
And I'm Elizabeth Payne-Maddalena, and I'm a senior associate attorney here at Berenzweig Leonard.
Liz, great to be here with you today, and a great topic too. We seem to be on the upswing. We're past a year into COVID, and it seems like things are on the upswing, and looks like we're going into a summer that hopefully will be a lot different than last summer. What's something, Liz, before we jump into this, what's something you're looking forward to doing this summer?
Thank you, and it's great to be back. Great to see you too. I think I'm really excited to start traveling again. My husband and I have been talking about getting a camper van, renting something like that, and just kind of traveling around so that way we can see all the places we've talked about seeing.
Oh, I did that one time with my family, like the 1-800-RENT-ME vans with the beds in it in the kitchen. Oh, it was so much fun. We had a blast. In fact, I think the kids had more fun when we parked it in the driveway. It was like a fort that they would just play with out there.
That's awesome. I will definitely be hitting you up for some information about what I need to look for when I'm renting.
Oh, yeah, I'm like Clark Griswold. And you know why I'm happy that COVID seems to be on the upswing and hopefully out of here, at least as we've had to experience it for the last year, is two words: COVID puppies. When we first started in this process of COVID back in March and April, we got a COVID puppy, as everybody else did. Teddy, great dog. Well, guess what we did this week? We got another COVID puppy. This time, my youngest daughter, Maura, wore me down, and now we have a very cool dog, Bentley. So now we kind of have three dogs in the house, and I'm not the biggest dog lover, but I do love these two dogs. They're pretty cool. But anyways, so we got a great topic today. A lot of our clients are asking about this. We're opening up the workplace, and we're thinking about doing it this summer. This is what clients are doing, bringing people back into the physical workspace. Keep in mind, people have been working their tails off for the last year. They've just been doing it in different settings. But now companies are looking to open up their workplace. And the issue of vaccinations is becoming sort of taking a front and center role. Liz, why are people talking about that?
Well, I mean, the issue with reopening offices or where employers are starting to talk about vaccines is as vaccines have become now available to anyone over the age of 16 in the U.S., a lot of employers who are looking at reopening offices are saying, do we want to consider, any kind of encouragement or requirement for people to be vaccinated?
So can employers? That's kind of question one, and I get this a lot. Can employers require employees to get vaccinated before they come back into the physical workspace?
The short answer is yes. Yes, employers can.
Okay, so they really have, so employers really have a lot of leverage here if they really want to be heavy-handed. They've got to steal a phrase from my law partner Seth. He was on Neil Cavuto yesterday, and he described it as employers in their legal toolbox have a hammer. If they want to bring people in, they can do so. Is that the smartest move here?
No, we always, recommend people make this about a communicative process and about, explaining to employees that what you're really concerned about is their safety, because that's what this is all about. We want to be able to reopen. We want life to get back to normal, but we want and understand that people are a little nervous to do so, especially after the past year, and taking it slow is the best way to go.
Are there any legal concerns that employers need to be sort of mindful of as they're, doing these requirements for vaccinations for their employees?
Yeah, so, employers will want to make sure that they're keeping in mind, the big issue is going to be the ADA. If someone is unable to, has a medical reason for making them unable to be vaccinated for COVID-19, that's going to be the big one.
So just to stop you there, Liz, when you say the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, how does that come into play here? Walk us through why the Americans with Disabilities Act would matter for purposes of, a blanket vaccination requirement for employees.
Sure. So, the Americans with Disabilities Act, it does require employers to make reasonable accommodation for, known disabilities, and in this case, the issue is going to be if you're requiring vaccinations to return to the office, to physical work in the office. Some employees who have legitimate medical reasons for not being vaccinated, they can't get vaccinated due to some medical condition, that's going to create a barrier. And so employers need to, be ready to make an assessment should the situation arise, and talk about reasonable accommodations as an alternative with that employee.
So if you have an employee who, and again, we always tell our clients, don't play doctor. So don't try to figure out whether or not an employee can or cannot safely get vaccinated, because there may be situations, and there probably are very much documented situations, where employees may not be able to actually get what they're injecting into your arm. It may mess them up somehow, or it may present a health hazard for them. So those are the employees we're talking about here, right?
Yes. Someone who, their doctor has said it's not advisable for you to get the vaccine right now. And what employers should do is, as you said, there's no reason to really dig into this. No employer really wants to, I think, find out all of the ins and outs of someone's medical history. The best thing to do is first, employers should consider whether or not the employee not being vaccinated, if they were to return to the office, would be what the Americans with Disabilities Act calls a direct threat. And the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission has already said that in general, an unvaccinated individual exposing others to the virus at an office would likely constitute a direct threat. So that's where the first part of the analysis comes in.
So in other words, normally under the Americans with Disabilities Act, you're sort of focused on the health or the disability of the employee. But in this particular case, the analysis is a little bit different. It's if they come into the workplace and they have not been vaccinated, they are still very much susceptible to the whole COVID virus. Therefore, they could present what you termed, and that's what the ADA uses, the phrase direct threat. They, in other words, not safe to have somebody who's not vaccinated in the workplace. That's if an employer decides that that's what they want to impose across the board. So what do they do in a situation like that? I mean, you don't want to see somebody lose their job just because they have a medical condition that doesn't let them come back into the workplace having been vaccinated.
Right, and the next step, and this is really clear, is that you need to determine if there's a reasonable accommodation available, and reasonable accommodation for a lot of employees will likely be continuing to work remotely, as long as that is something that is reasonably doable in their position. That's going to be the likely result. Now, I say that will be the result, but every employer should make sure that they go through the analysis for every employee as the situation arises for each employee, just to satisfy some of the procedural steps under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and make sure that they are determining what the best reasonable accommodation available for the employer and their employee is. This is a collaborative process.
It's a two-way street. Always got to be done on a case-by-case basis. That's great. And so then what is it besides the ADA? Is there anything else employers need to be mindful of from a legal perspective when they have these across-the-board vaccination requirements?
Yeah, the two other areas where something could arise is under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. If an employee has a sincerely held religious belief that would essentially cause them to not be vaccinated or not be able to be vaccinated in accordance with that sincere religious belief, that's one where, again, reasonable accommodations would be made.
Yeah, you and I talked about that. We sort of debated that before we got on camera here, and I personally just don't understand that one as well. I'm wondering whether that's going to come up very much. There are some religions that I guess have come out just against vaccinations in general. But again, I think that's going to be a tougher one for an employee. The health one is going to be perhaps an easier one. Definitely, they have no control over it. But again, then the question is, okay, so your religion says you should not get vaccines. What then? I mean, where are you going to work? I mean, you're going to work at home, and then it just becomes a little bit, in my opinion, a different analysis. But I wonder how many of those we're actually going to see at the end of the day. What do you think?
I don't think we'll see many of them. I looked into it a bit, and most of, I guess you would call them the larger or more predominant religious sects have, endorsed vaccinations, including COVID-19 vaccinations. So I agree. The bigger issue is going to be those people who, due to a medical condition, just cannot be vaccinated at this time. And that's, I think, going to be the big area. The one other thing I would mention is there could be some state laws depending on where an employer is located that could create issues. But that's really going to be an evolving issue, I think, and also is going to depend on where you are.
Yeah, no, that's a great point by mentioning state laws, because sometimes that gets lost in the mix. We're so used to, well, what are the feds? What have they passed? They've given, for instance, I know under the latest federal legislation dealing with COVID, they've given time off for employees to get vaccinated and requiring that employers pay that. That mostly, in my opinion, would come about with hourly employees, because salaried employees are going to get paid for the week regardless if they have to take an hour or two off for getting the vaccination. So that's a great point. So now let's just say, okay, we've dealt with those exceptions or those special considerations that we might have. But let's just say for all the rest of the employees, how do you know what should an employer do to make sure that the employee has gotten vaccinated? Like, what should they be asking for here?
Right, and this is something that you and I both know a lot of our clients have been asking us. And what we have been, recommending is the best thing to do is have an employee sign a self-certification saying, yes, I have been vaccinated. I've received both doses of the vaccine, and to the extent applicable, and given time for the vaccine to take full effect, and have that signed and have them turn that in. That seems to be the easiest and
Not
probably the
asking,
best
yeah,
way. Yeah.
not asking for their vaccine card, not asking for a copy of that or any other medical records. You think that might be going too far?
I mean, I think it can create a whole bunch of issues when it comes to, if you're going to ask for proof, the CDC has already said, and that's the Centers for Disease Control, has already said, you can ask for proof from an employee's doctor, or medical provider, or the pharmacist for the vaccination, but no other medical information with it. So then you're already getting into, well, what is going to be allowed, what isn't. Those vaccine cards have some, personal information on there, some that would, dates of birth. I think this is just the easiest way to handle it. I know some employers, they'd say, well, what if an employee lies? What if an employee, signs the self-certification and is lying? First of all, I don't know if you've seen it. There are news stories or about people selling vaccination cards on eBay. So you can fake one of those too.
The good old internet. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. What can't you get on eBay? Uh, the other thing is that if you're getting to that point, then you've got a whole other problem to deal with.
I
And
think you're
I
right.
don't think
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess last question is, what other sort of best practices as companies are looking to reopen the physical workplace, what other best practices are we seeing out there for our clients in terms of communications to employees?
Yeah, and I think communication is key here.
Always
Talking
is.
to
Yep.
Yeah, talking about how this is, announcing it in advance. If employers want to have a slower reopening, this is oftentimes where you can start kind of testing it out, seeing what the reactions are, listening to employees, and reminding employees again that this is about their safety. This is about keeping everyone safe as we start going through this process, and understanding that again, it's slower is going to be better here. Let everyone have time. We've been through this for over a year now. I know we all want to rush into things, but it's better to let everyone feel comfortable and get back into the post-vaccine world.
And it also sends a good message that, listen, people have been working their butts off for the last year. They've been working largely at home. Some people have hybrid work arrangements where they're maybe working in the office but also at home. But you got to be careful of the message that you're sending, I think, when you say, I want, if you're too heavy-handed, I want everybody back in here vaccinated in the office by X date. It really kind of, in some ways, sends a bit of it sort of minimizes what people have done for the last year, as though that wasn't good enough. We need this now. So I think that's a great point. Well taken, Liz.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the other thing. And we certainly know that employers are also considering how they are going, whether or not they want to have a partially remote workplace. And that's a whole other podcast we could get into.
Yes.
So
that's a whole nother discussion. Well, listen, Liz, great discussion. I know personally, the accommodation that I'm going to be asking for here at Berenzweig Leonard. We need a bring your dog to work accommodation, because I got a whole house full of dogs apparently after this whole COVID. Todd, I'm going to have Todd, our producer, here as my dog walker. But I think that's what I'm going to need after what we've been through. We need to get my family back into the workplace and back into school, because otherwise we're going to have more dogs every time I go home.
Yeah, no worries, and I'm on board for bring your dog to work. As someone who is still working on that at home in my house, I'm happy to play with someone else's dog if they're in the workplace, and I think that's a great idea.
There you go. Great discussion. Thanks, everyone, for joining us for this edition of Real World Employment Law.